Hello, everybody. Welcome to this evening's teaching service, and hopefully this will be beneficial and enlightening to many people that have never attended our service, and for those who have attended our services. More explaining and understanding. So when you participate in any type of service, the more understanding you have, the better you feel equipped, more connected, more involved you can become in the service. So after our cookout and discussion yesterday on the Native American page, the Red Road of Life in Christ Intertribal Fellowship, and hopefully for the viewers on this page of the Druid Order of Mystical Encounters, you went over to that group and watched that. If not, I highly encourage you to go watch that and listen to the questions and answers that was given in that discussion. It was very beneficial. I think it gave a lot of people encouragement to step forward, to participate in these groups, and to get more involved instead of being someone on the sideline. And right off, that is one of the things that is a value in Druidry, and is a value in Native American type services, is we highly encourage participation, because in our Western culture, we are very much adapted to just sitting in a pew or sitting in a stadium, even in a graduation ceremony. We are not really participating, we are observers. And so in Druid ceremonies and indigenous ceremonies, it is highly encouraged that you participate, because the more you participate, the more you connect with everyone there and with the spiritual aspects of the service. Hello, Sandra. Hello, April. So wonderful to see y'all on here. Just got started, so you haven't missed anything. So to break down a Christian Druid type service, and in these services, while any and all faiths are welcome, just do know that the center message of these services is to point to Christ. We ask that you come with an open mind, open heart, and respect, just as you would ask of us to come to your type of belief or spirituality. And to note on that, what are these services doing? These services are to connect you to your heritage, to connect you in spirit and inspiration, to connect you in relationship with those physically around you and with those energetic properties around you that come from nature. And there's a big thing going on these days called universal Christ consciousness, that these different leaders, spiritual movements and stuff are a type of Christ conscious, a universal Christ. I myself do not believe in that, but I do like the wording and I like the idea of it. So these services are doing that, but flipped around. Not that the universal Christ is a consciousness in all things, but the universe is conscious of Christ. And so the person of Christ is from all eternity past, ever present, and all eternity future. And that all cultures have had a conscious awareness to some measure of degree of the Christ that was, is, and will be evermore. And a lot of the structure in Druidry outside of this type of tradition is very liturgical. because we don't know much about the Druids, maybe about 9 pages long of historical facts. And so a lot of what is done in Druidry is modern. And you have groups that were called Druid revivalists. And so they revived the practice of Druidry using the ancient Druids as a means of a springboard and inspiration. But they are not trying to be exactly like old ancient Druids, because we just don't know enough about them. And then you have groups that are Druid reconstructionists. And so they are trying to reconstruct to a more whole-centered, exact type of replica of Druidry. And just to give you an example, a Druid revivalist would be like the group Obod, which is the order of Bard, Ovates, and Druids. A group that would be a Druid reconstructionist would be ADF, which is a abbreviation for a Gaelic word that I cannot pronounce, but it means a fellowship of Druids. And so they practice completely different, and they worship the old Celtic deities of the British Isles, and they make offerings and sacrifices to their gods and goddesses. And so there's one branch of Druidry that is more modern and influenced by ancient Druids. The other one is trying to be as much like them as possible. And then you come to a group like me, which is often called sometimes Christo-pagan, and Chris meaning Christ, and O meaning and pagan. And so pagan was an old term used for farmers, people out in the country, and more your folkish traditions. And so a Christo-pagan is someone primarily, and this varies on 2 groups as well. You can be pagan that values Christian tradition, but you're solely pagan. Or you can be Christian, that at your core you're a Christian, but you value traditions that come from paganism or the country folk. And so these are traditions and heritages of folkish custom from these different groups. And so with our Druid services, we try to follow a liturgical type of structure that follows what is known as the 3 realms, or also the Celtic sun wheel, or known as the Celtic cross. And see how I want to break this down here. The reason why a lot of Druid ceremonies are liturgical, because when starting, they was influenced by Christianity. So your ancient resources, which goes back about 500 years when the Druid revival started. So the modern Druid movement is roughly around 500 years old. And then they were, a great majority of them, Christian Universalists. And they were influenced by Christianity, and it was just in their DNA. And so when they revived this practice, you have a lot of Christian vocabulary. So Druidry has always had an openness to Christianity and finding similarity. They also believed that because when Christianity came to the British Isles, specifically Ireland, the Christian saints that went into Ireland, it's one of the best movements of Christianity that did not involve bloodshed. And it was also an era of time when the Roman Empire, which made Christianity a imperialism, the British Isles was far away from Rome. And so that type of Christianity was more your monastery, monkish type of Christianity. They were influenced by the Desert Fathers, and they believed in more converting by friendship and finding and pointing Christ out already in those native lands. As something like Thomas Merton said, it is good that the settlers brought Christianity to the Native Americans. What they failed to do was to already see Christ in the Native Americans. But the Celtic saints that went to Ireland, more as the Apostle Paul did with the Jews and the other apostles, they showed Christ as a completeness or a fuller revelation of the divine to them. So it was not so much of get rid of this, get rid of that, change this, change that. It was more, hey, these were shadows of things pointing to the one who was to come, and you don't have to get rid of them, just see their fullness now. And that's how that was done. And one of the children of the Celtic saints, or the Celtic church, was Saint Francis. And so Saint Francis is loved by many people, Christian and non-Christian alike. And so if you want to see the results of the Celtic Christianity, then look to Saint Francis, as he was a child of that movement. And so they believed that the Druids was absorbed into the Christian church in the British Isles. It was not that they were vanquished or slaughtered or went extinct. It's that they just merged into them. And so we look at a lot of our old Anglican and Anglo-Saxon type of worship and see remnants of Celtic pagan practice. We look at the myths and mythology of the Irish and the Scots and the Welsh, and also the story of King Arthur and the quest for the Holy Grail and Merlin and all that. We look to those for inspiration because we believe that as Christianity was spreading through the British Isles, those were early mythologies that were made that incorporated pagan values and traditions and customs into a storytelling frame that would be acceptable to the public, and thus they could be retained and not forgotten, though done in a code-like manner. And so at the beginning of a Druid's service, we, like a lot of your liturgical services, we have a procession, and we process into the grove from a different location, and that is very useful. And what it does is it calms the mind down, it allows the soul to quieten, and it allows you to rest and be grounded and centered. And so we will proceed from one location into the grove. And oftentimes that will be accompanied by drums, flutes, chanting and song, and bells. And so as we come into that procession, we are leaving behind and coming into a place. And one chant that is often sung is, we approach the sacred grove of hearts and minds and flesh and bone. Join us now in ways of old. We have come home. And so we are approaching the sacred, of hearts and minds, of flesh and bone, bringing us present and reminding us of who we are as a human being. Join us now in ways of old. This is something that has roots. And then we have come home, a place of belonging. And so that's what you're setting in your mind frame and in your spirit. And a lot of times with our services, we will carry the Celtic cross. And so we're following behind Christ. But also, if you're not Christian, this still can have a lot of value to you. It marks the 4 quarters, marking of the seasons of the year as the sun travels. And there is a center, and then there is a circle, and a circle within a circle. And then this intertwining of Celtic knots. So a lot of the things can have meaning and symbolism to everybody. And it is also a reminder, going again, that the universe has had a consciousness of Christ. And that within the realm of a greater circle, we've had a existence that has brought a balance to our life as we intertwine the material and the spiritual world coming to the center. Now, for a Christian druid, this can represent that Christ loves us and that his love, like a circle, is unending with no beginning and no ending, and that as we go through the trail of life and its different twists and turns, we walk it not alone, but with each other and with Christ, and that we come to the center, back to our Creator. Then also, in the Irish tales, the Tuatha De Danann, the old ancient heroes and gods and goddesses of the Irish, they brought 4 gifts with them from 4 different cities. So the Irish have a tale that there's no really creation story. It is a migration. Ireland has always been a place of migration. And so they bring 4 elements or tools or gifts with them: a spear, a sword, a stone, and a cauldron. And they represent the 4 elements. And so this can be the spear of victory. And as Christ overcame everything, that Christus Victus, that Latin phrase that Christ is victor, is victorious. And so we proceed in victory into the grove. And then in the grove here, as you can see right here, is a stone. And it is right in the center. Now, the Tuatha De Danann, they had the stone of virtue and destiny. And it was said that the stone would sing when the rightful king or queen would place their foot on it. The stone would sing because it was announcing virtue and the true destiny of the land. That this was a good destiny full of virtue. And for a Christian druid, that's Ula's barking. It's okay, Ula. She heard something off in the distance. But that stone is a reminder that where are we going with our destiny? And is it a virtuous one? And so it's in the center of the Celtic cross, going out in the 4 directions. So when we come into that service We want to come into the center, aligning with our destiny and in good virtue. So when we leave, we are walking in a good path. It also reminds us that we build our lives on a solid foundation, which echoes teachings of the Christ tradition. And the spear of victory, like I was mentioning earlier, that represents the element of air. And then the stone represents the element of earth. And if you want to take notes, it's going to be quite a lot of information. But then we come to the sword. And so the sword of truth. And it was said that when it was wielded, it wielded and radiated out a bright white light. And a sword, what does a sword do? It cuts and it divides. And so it cuts through all the entanglement and mess. And so a lie wants to bring an illusion. A lie wants to entangle and get you confused that you don't know what to believe until the point that you just believe whatever. And the sword cuts through all that. And the sword represents the element of fire. And so truth cuts through the lies. Truth shows where our differences lie and also shows where we can unite. Now, you notice that this is wood. Now, some druids do have steel and metal swords. I particularly wanted a wooden sword because this sword cannot harm. It cannot damage. And so the truth should not hurt us. It should not be a killing tool. We should not use the truth to destroy the lives of others. We should use the truth to defend and to correct. Now, if I hit you with this sword, you will have like a bruise or a welt, but it will not cut you and you won't bleed to death. And so that's why I wanted it to be wood. And also with fire needs a source of fuel. And so where do we find our source of fuel to ignite our flame of truth? And so when we call the quarters, we often use the sword. And the sword is often used in king and queen and knight era, in knighthood, to salute and to greet. And so a sword of wood, we often at the quarters give a pronunciation of peace. So may there be peace in the east. May there be peace in the south. Now, why do we do that? Well, what records that we do have of Druidry, there is a description that Druids were advisors and advocates to kings and to the monarchy. And a Druid had such high respect that it is noted that a Druid walked out into a field in battle. And if the Druid did not think that it was a just cause to have a war, that Druid could walk in that field before the battle started and could claim peace, and neither army would fight each other. And so that's why in a lot of Druid services we proclaim peace, because the Druids were known to uphold justice and to pronounce peace where there was conflict. And they had such authority that even the monarchy would respect it and would have to follow it. And so Druidry also is a movement that stands up for justice. and to promote peace. And oftentimes Christ talks about his peace that he gives to the world and gives to those who follow him. And so we are proclaiming as a mantra, as an affirmation, and also as a prayer that in all directions that there would be peace, and that there would be peace within us and within this grove. And so sometimes we will say the Druid's prayer of peace, which is, within the still center of my being, may I find peace. Within the gentle circle of my grove, may I cultivate peace. And within the greater circles of all humanity or all existences or all life, may I gently and powerfully radiate peace. And so it's reminding us that peace is first found within. Peace is then cultivated to the realm that is around you, and from there it radiates out. And so that's why we do peace, and we are proclaiming peace through truth. And then the cauldron can also be described as a well. And so we have the sacred whale right there. And whales were very sacred in the British Isles. There is thousands of sacred whales scattered all over the British Isles. And that reminds us of the lower world, where our ancestors lie. And so there was a big veneration of ancestry. And the cauldron was a means of tapping into that lower world, and sacred whales were tapped into that as well. But also Christ, or the wild green Christ, as I like to call him, talked a lot about a well of life springing up within the individual person. And so as that well of life and that sacred water of life springs out of us, it goes forth and waters the world. But back to the cauldron, the one cauldron that is mentioned is in those four gifts of the Tuatha De Danann, is the cauldron of the Dagda, which was their supreme male deity. And in his cauldron represented water. And from that water came abundance and prosperity. And it is said that the cauldron of the Dagda never went empty, and everyone who ate from it left full and satisfied. And so we use that symbolism. And right here I have a silver tea vessel, which is used for sugar. So this is from a tea set, but you would have your sugar in here. But we use it as a cauldron during communion. So I put the bread in here, and people take out, or I'll take out for them, the bread, meaning as Christ is the bread from heaven, giving that abundant life. And then another cauldron, which is called the cauldron of Cerridwen. And Cerridwen was a moon Welsh goddess, but in mythology stories she is depicted as a witch. And Cerridwen means bent one, or white bent one. And so we believe that is in connection with the moon, and that the moon has a cauldron of inspiration, of poetic vision and intuition. And so the cauldron represents transformation. And so we will take this silver cup or a chalice, and a chalice is nothing but a cauldron with a stem, and also can represent the Holy Grail, which is a quest of finding your Alwyn, your inspiration. But more on that, not to get ahead of myself. But in the story of Ceridwen, Gwion Bach goes through a transformation of cycles and shape-shifting, and he becomes the greatest bard ever known as Taliesin, which means radiant brow. So like those halo pictures, he radiates, his face shines with inspiration, sort of like Moses coming down from the mountain that he had to veil his face because it radiated with glory and beauty. And so the cauldron of the wine and the water represents a cauldron of transformation, and life transforms you. And so the cauldron of plenty, the bread and body of Christ, the cauldron of transformation, the life and blood of Christ. And so, as you can see, these stories and these mythologies, they have a connection that the universe was always conscious of Christ. Not that there is a universal Christ consciousness, but that the universe has a consciousness of Christ. And now, if you disagree with that, that's totally fine. You're perfectly able to disagree. I'm just giving the view that's being presented within the service. Now, another thing in a Druid service is the Alwyn. So we was talking about the Holy Grail, or the quest of the Holy Grail. And the quest of the Holy Grail is to find your Alwyn. And Alwyn is a Welsh word meaning divine flow, breath, and inspiration. It is a gift from the divine. I don't know if y'all can see this or not, but the way it looks on my screen, I know, squirrel, the way it looks on my screen is like right above me here is a giant cross. Huh. I don't know if that's just what I'm seeing or if you can see that or not. Anyway, I spotted that. Okay, squirrel moment over. And so a lot of times in our services, somewhere within the service, we will chant Alwyn 3 times. 3 is a sacred number in Druidry. Also 9, because it is 3 of 3. And if you get 4 of 3, you get 12. And there you have your 12 zodiac signs, your 12 apostles, and that aligns with the Celtic cross of the sun wheel. And then you got 3 in each realm there. So trying not to go too deep. I want to make those more in-depth studies in the future. Just trying to give you the core basis of a service. We will chant Alwyn like Ah, Oo, In. And you are visualizing these 3 rays of light coming down on you. And we do it 3 times, 3 of 3, because you are connecting with all creation, all realms. And excuse me just one moment. Ula has got herself tangled up. So I need to go untangle her real quick. Okay, I'm back. Silly girl. But anyway, so we are chanting that, kind of bringing everything that we did prior to the service. So in the priorness of the service is we have proceeded into the grove. We have acknowledged the four directions, and that is acknowledging the cycle of the seasons, acknowledging the cycle, death, and rebirth of creation. That is acknowledging the four elements that make up our creation. We will ask for blessings and stuff over the sacred grove of the Nuifridu, which is a Welsh word for sky, but a lot of times we use it to reference to the fifth element, life force energy or spirit, or the ether. And then as we've done that, we're bringing that all into a collection and uniting with all of that. And so we will do it 3 times, meaning the divine inspiration above, the divine inspiration within, and the divine inspiration connecting all out around us. And as it comes down in, you yourself are that cauldron, allowing that inspiration to transform you and bubble out that inspiration. And so your Awen is like your vocation, your calling, your purpose of life. It's what gives you life. And so my inspiration is to help be a healer and a introducer of people to Christ. Because to me personally, Christ is my everything. He is my life. My heart, my soul sings and radiates with joy and purpose and light and life and love when I am in communion and in fellowship with Christ and expressing that outward. And so that's what we're doing in that. And I've actually come up with a new chant that brings that down. And I may sing it for you here in a minute. So that is the Awen. And it's a very central message within Druidry, is finding your Awen. And that's why a lot of times at the end of devotions or services, I'll say, and may you be the Awen. May you be the divine inspiration in someone's life. That you would find your Awen. And as your Awen radiates from you, you are a Awen to someone else. Now you may notice that when we come into the grove, we will circle 3 times. That is to represent traversing the 3 realms. And so in Druidry, we have the 3 realms. The sky realm, the land realm, and the sea realm. The sky represents the higher consciousness, or where the divine or higher ascended spirits or energies. The land realm is sort of like Middle Earth. That is where like your land spirits and things like that reside, and ourselves. It is that in between the higher and lower. And it also represents your day-to-day consciousness. The sea represents the realm of the ancestors. It also represents the deep, dark place, is what it's actually called in Gaelic a lot of times, or the Welsh tales. And it's just the deep, dark. And it's not meaning like scary or anything. It represents the subconsciousness or the shadow self. And we acknowledge those 3 realms, and that we live around and amidst those three realms. And so as we have proceeded into the grove, we are circling 3 times within that grove. And what that does is kind of give your mind an altered state. And it symbolizes that we're no longer in the mundane, in the regular world, and that we have called the energies that make us up as humans and make up the world with those 4 elements or 5 elements. And then we often say a prayer over the top of the sacred grove is called a nematon. And the nematon is related to Nematona, which was a British goddess of like the starry heavens, or the goddess of the grove. And so if you believe that the Holy Spirit is of a feminine aspect of the divine, we are asking the Holy Spirit, like a mother, to wrap us in the womb of that sacred grove, that nematon. And in Druidry, from sources that we have researched and found, that was known as the Druid's egg. And Druids supposedly carried a stone that looked like an egg. And they used it for different means. And so it's also a small symbol of like the cosmology, the cosmos of the universe, that the whole outer space and stuff, all of this is within a divine egg. And when we're in the sacred grove, we are like in that egg, ready to be birthed of something new and transformative. Now, then within, after doing and connecting with these 3 realms, doing all that, then we come into a time of the bard, the ovate, and the druid. So the druids were known to wear white robes, or to have a mantle, of a white mantle or something. The ovates, in modern terms, let's just stick with modern. In modern druidry, if you are in the 3 grades, the bardic grade, you wear a blue robe. And the bards were the historians and the genealogical holders of their history. They could also be used as prophetic means. They might break out into prophecy in like a trance-like state. And then the ovates, which was the healers, they wore green. And they were more of what you would actually associate with your modern day image of the witch. So really, it's my personal belief that witches were the ovates of the druids of the past. And they were the seers and the diviners, the prophets and prophetesses within the woods. They were the herbalists and the healers, the midwives, and the wise folk out on the edge of town. And then you had the druids, and they wore white robes, and they were more your people of philosophy and judicial systems, and like a lawyer type base and an advisor, and maybe like the old astrologer, the wizard imagery comes from the white-robed druid. And a druid also had the skills and techniques of the other grades as well, because you progressed to the druid grade. And so we try to break that up in the service in having with the realms the bardic stage, the ovate stage, and the druid stage. And so after doing the Alwyn, we might come into the realm of C, of poetry, storytelling, connecting with the emotions. And then we might go into a activity with the land, and that would be the ovate. And then the more ceremonial priestly action, maybe of having communion or a bringing to a head of the service, would be the druid part of the service. So that is a lot of information. So let's go back and break it down in simple terms. What is happening here? Let's say we're doing a normal service with communion. So we would process into the grove, setting our hearts and minds to come into the sacred. We come into the sacred, signifying that we are connecting in this time and place with all of creation. We are coming into the cosmos of the world, of the universe, within this realm and also not within this realm. And we do this in church all the time. It's just worded different, and so we fear it. And as we have came in, we need to set the stage within our own self and around us to connect with that. And so we come in, we traverse 3 times around the grove, connecting and allowing our mind and heart to alter with the 3 realms. We face to the 4 directions, acknowledging our makeup of earth, air, fire, and water. We may even address Christ or God or the Holy Spirit or angels or archangels in these realms that we are encircled and brought together in unity by these elements and energies that make us who we are. As the chant says, earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. And then after we have made peace and declared peace, inviting these energies of the cosmos in, declaring peace to go out, we then want that divine inspiration to come within our circle. And so we sing the chant of Alwyn. Then after that, going into the realm of water, someone or some people will have a story to tell, a song to sing, a poetry to express, something that inspires. We might do a dance or something to express emotion. And then after that, we'll go into the ovate. And so we might have a craft or something, or a meditation, or the sermon, if you want to call it that, for that time, a teaching lesson to partake in. And then moving into communion, now we're coming into that priestly divine connection and ceremony. And so we are reminded that of the material and the liquid is what makes us. And we connect in being reminded that the divine sends to the earth, then to us. And then we send to the earth, to the divine. And both is connected in that material of bread and wine. And then in the cauldron, the wine and the water mix, the red and the white dragon of chaos and structure. And both need to be released to have transformation. And then the bread coming from the seed to the grain, to the harvesting, to the transformation, to the consuming. And so those are ways that if you're not Christian, you can connect with that in communion. And so as coming together, we have connected with the earth, the realms of existence. We've acknowledged our three ancestors of blood, stone, and spirit, which is directly blood of you, stone, ancestors of the land you're upon, so a land acknowledgement, and those that have inspired you in their way of life, that you just have that deep connection, even though they're not a blood relation, you just totally connect with them, that have inspired you. And so in moving in that cosmos, within that sacred grove, we find the divine without, within, and all around. And we commune together as one. And so some services might appear more heritage of pagan nature, and other times they might be more liturgical as a Christian church service, just depending on what's going on. And totally open to newer things. Like, heck, I would love to do yoga in the Grove, you know. But as for main events, main big services, that's the makeup. And so once the communion is over, we declare peace again. But what I like to do is to declare the words of Julian of Norwich, is that each goes to a direction, and in the four directions they say, all shall be well, all shall be well, all the way around. And then we come to the center, and all manner of things shall be well. And that is what Christ told Julian of Norwich in her visions of Christ. And so after we have done that, that has been the dismissal of declaring that peace. And we, after that, we then proceed out of the grove and then enjoy a meal or something afterwards, or we just go home. So it sounds like a lot, but it does flow very well, especially once you get the rhythm of it. And then when you understand the symbolism and meaning behind it, and you see it all come to a head, it can be quite beautiful and magical. Also, something that a lot of people don't know to do, when you are facing the four directions and you are calling that element or acknowledging that aspect of the divine, say like, O Christ of the rising sun, who shines light upon my soul and gives me the breath of life, let me see you and know you in this direction. Or Christ of the mighty fire, as brother sun in the height of his glory, may I burn with will and passion and zeal for your essence. And then, or in the west, O deep Christ of nurturing and healing waters, flow and cleanse me and wash me over, that I may walk in a pure way of living. Or, O Christ, as my solid foundation, as the earth sustains and supports me in the deep silence of the cold of the winter solstice, rest in me, germinating those seeds of your divine gifts, ready to burst forth in the spring. It's just those different things like that. When you're saying that stuff, you are visualizing or feeling that in that direction. So if I say in the east, I call upon the element of air, well, then I need to feel like the wind brushing across my face. Or I see leaves in a whirlwind coming towards me. And same thing like with fire. Or if I'm calling Archangel Gabriel or Raphael or Michael, you see them in front of you coming. And sometimes like with the angels, I'll say, Archangel Michael of the blue flame, come and be in this south quarter and defend us against all evil and harmful spirits. And then when I say hail and welcome, or be welcome in this place, So say like hail, I will put my hands like this. Hail, like I'm piercing something. And welcome, I'm opening that door, and maybe put my hands like angel wings. And so you're connecting with this. And your mind does not know the difference between imagination and reality. And so it taps you more into that energy to connect. And so be like, hail and welcome, angel wings. And then when you're ending that, and I go back to the South Quarter and say, Archangel Michael, who is like God? That's the name of Michael. Thank you for protecting this grove and giving your guidance in this service. And then I might be like, hail and farewell. And so that's closing what I was doing. I'm reversing and shutting that. Or go your way in peace, and doing prayer hands. So those are things that you can do with that. But a lot of people just mouth off words. It's not about just mouthing off words, because words mean diddly squat. It is the intention, it is the feeling behind the words. And I know I'm getting on a little bit of rant, but just to give you an example, cuss words, they're just words. And if you use the word crap, but let's just say S-H-I-T, here, when we hear that word, we have a meaning behind it, a interpretation. We have put power into that word, and by our programming of that word is what amount of power or influence that word has over us. Now, if you go over to a country that's never heard that word, and you say, you're eating a bowl of soup or something, and you say, man, this is some good schnight. And the person says, what's that mean? And you say, oh, that just means it's really good. Well, then they come over here, and someone that does not like that word, and they're eating dinner, and they're eating it and like, boy, that's some good schnight. And everybody's like, oh, and they might think you're saying it is terrible, like the food is like crap. Or they might be offended that you would use what they have programmed in their head to think as vulgar or impolite. So you have disrespected that home. Why? Because what power you have given to that word. But the word itself means nothing. So when you're calling the quarters or acknowledging aspects of God in the quarters, you need to have a heartfelt to that direction. And same thing with the Awen chant. If you're just going A-O-N, nothing's going to happen. But if you visualize and feel that divine flowing in, and things like that. So I think I have rambled on long enough. I'm going to go on to the Red Road of Life in Christ, the Intertribal Fellowship on that page, and talk a bit on the Native American service. So I will look back over your comments because I can't see them on here. I can see when people join, but I can't see their comments. But thank you for viewing. Hope this has been informative and makes sense, and that I just didn't ramble all over the place, but that you can see the flow and structure. There is a method to the madness. So hope you all have a great day, and may you be the Alwyn.